the Transportation Museum. Welcome to Pine Crazy Saturday as we honor our good friend and adventure pilot, Rutan. Thank you for driving and flying in to Mojave Air and Spaceport at Rutan Field. We have an outstanding group of speakers who will share their memories of the day. Thank you, and a big shout out to Ariel, Sue, and the Mojave Airport staff. Yay! For their outstanding above and beyond work on setting up the event center for this memorial. I think it looks fantastic. Special thank you to Carrie for that flag. I love it, and Dick would love that flag. I know he'd stand there and salute it. Thank you to Scale Composites for all the water and help. Thank you to Virgin Galactic for the use of this large screen and thank you to Dan Craig, Jeff Hawley, and the airport staff for bringing the Voyager model out of Legacy Park and putting it here. This model actually flew. It's a radio controlled model. It flew at the 25th anniversary of the Voyager flight off the same runway that they used. Back then it was runway 25, but Glenn Dunlap of Cincinnati, Ohio built this and asked if he could bring it out. And at the time, Dick and Bert and their father, George, Dr. George Rutan, was there to watch this fly. And I remember Dick taking pictures. Is Pastor Aaron. Then we'll have a presentation of the colors by the Blue Eagles Color Guard. And National Anthem will be sung by Rick Medley. Let's look to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you right now with grateful hearts and thanksgiving that we were able to gather together to remember our dear friend, Dick Rutan. We ask a special blessing on his family, Bert and Nell, all his children, grandchildren. Be with us today, Lord, as we celebrate his life. Thank you, Lord. God bless America. In Jesus' name, amen. Present colors. And Rick, you can come up and sing the national anthem if you would.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and rockets red glare, bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home
Thank you. You may be seated. Prepared a proclamation to be presented to the Rutan family. And accepting this proclamation will be the sister of Dick and Bert Rutan, Mel Rutan. So if you would like to come up now with the proclamation, and Kelly, were you going to come up with now?
Whereas it is with profound sorrow that we recognize the passing of a pioneering aviator, an exemplary leader, and an integral member of our community, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Dick Rutan, retired. And whereas Dick Rutan, born on July 1st, 1938, in Loma Linda, California, embarked on a remarkable journey, leaving an indelible mark on the world of aviation. And whereas his daring spirit and determination propelled him to achieve groundbreaking feats, most notably his historic, non-stop, non-refueled circumnavigation of the globe in the Voyager aircraft, a triumph that captivated the imagination of millions worldwide and secured his place in aviation history. And whereas he proudly served his country as an Air Force pilot, flying 325 combat missions during the Vietnam War, including 105 high-risk classified enlistee operations. Whereas throughout his career as a pilot, entrepreneur, and visionary, Dick Rutan inspired countless individuals to pursue their dreams fearlessly and push the boundaries of what is deemed possible. And whereas his legacy extends beyond his achievements in aviation to include his role as a mentor, philanthropist, and advocate for STEM education, encouraging future generations to embrace the spirit of exploration. And whereas Dick Rutan's impact on the aerospace industry and his contributions to the advancement of aviation technology will continue to resonate for generations to come, serving as a testament to his enduring legacy of courage, innovation, and resilience. And whereas his achievements earned him many accolades and awards, including, in part, the Silver Star, 5 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 16 Air Medals, the Purple Heart, the Louis Blériot Medal, being named an Eagle to the Gathering of Eagles Foundation, being inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame, and being a recipient of the Presidential Citizens Medal of Honor. Be it resolved that we at Mojave Air and Spaceport at Rutan Field extend our deepest condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of Dick Rutan and honor his life, his achievements, and his enduring legacy with profound gratitude and admiration. Be it further resolved that this resolution be inscribed in the records of the district and a copy be presented to the family of Dick Rutan as a token of our heartfelt sympathy and respect.
Thank you to everyone for giving this honor to my brother. He led an exciting life, and it's wonderful that it's being acknowledged Thank you very much.
That's lovely. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Nell. I love the spirit at this airport. When there's a need, everyone just comes together. All the businesses, all the people. It's just a lovely spirit that I haven't seen elsewhere. And that's what happened with this memorial. Everybody just came together and just made it happen. And it was so wonderful, and I really appreciate it. We have some wonderful speakers, and I won't do any lengthy introductions. I'll just call them by name. But first I have Colonel Douglas Wiggert, U.S. Air Force Commander of the 412th Test Wing.
All right, well, thank you, Kathy. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's quite an honor to be invited to kind of help share in the celebration of Dick Rutan. On behalf of, I think, the Blue Eagles, they have already departed. We always do that. We barely have time to thank them, but just an extraordinary job. So thank you very much for letting Edwards Air Force Base and the 412th Test Wing take part. So I first met Dick Rutan nearly 20 years ago at an SCPP annual symposium. It was the year after it had moved from the Bonaventure down to Anaheim. But I had known Dick's story for a very long time before that first encounter. I was a young captain at the time and a brand new baby test pilot, and I was more than a little starstruck to meet one of my kind of childhood heroes, but I desperately tried not to be too much of a fanboy as I stood there, trading stories with Dick. I'd already met Bert about a year earlier. It was during our U.S. Naval TPS field trip out to Mojave, out to right here. We spent a lot of time over at Scaled Composites. It was in the spring of 2004. Scaled was right in the thick of testing Spaceship One, but Bert was extremely generous with his time. He spent over 6 hours with our TPS class, and probably would have spent another 6 hours talking about aircraft design and flight tests if it wasn't for the fact that we actually had to drive down to LAX. We had to leave to catch a red-eye back to Pax River. While we were there at Scale, Bert took us over to the hangar that's just over there and showed us Global Flyer, which was being instructed at the time. Global Flyer was clearly the offspring of Voyager, of the earlier Voyager design, and it was proof that Voyager and Dick Rutan continue to aspire the imagination as it has since 1986. So in December of 1986, while home from middle school at Christmas vacation, there may have been a 13-year-old boy in Ohio who was absolutely captivated by what was not only happening on the other side of the country, but was happening around the world. It was, from the very start of that dramatic Sunday morning takeoff, one of the longest runways I've ever taken off and landed on is the one just 12 miles over there. It's runway 5. At the time it was runway 4 over at Edwards Air Force Base. That Sunday morning takeoff required all but 700 feet of that 3-mile long runway. During that takeoff, at the first checkpoint, Voyager was 1 knot slow. At the second checkpoint, it was 2 knots slow. At the final checkpoint, halfway down the runway, it was 4 knots slow, and the abort criteria was 3 knots. But Dick continued. The fuel-laden wings and the boom, they'd never taken off with that much fuel. It actually caused the wingtips to twist down to a negative angle of attack, so the wings were flying down. Dick had no idea. When you listen to the recording, you hear Bert saying, "Pull back, Dick, pull back." That 2 minutes and 3 second takeoff roll, you only had to get to 87 knots to rotate. 2 minutes and 3 seconds. It was dramatic from the start of that Sunday morning. And then the next 9 days, that 13-year-old boy in Ohio followed every single news update. There wasn't in the internet, well there was, it was the ARPANET, but I didn't know what it was. Or that 13-year-old boy, that hypothetical, theoretical 13-year-old boy, whoever he might be. There was the Typhoon Marge in the Pacific that they had to fly around. There was the autopilot failure. The sloshing fuel going back and forth that made it look like they were consuming fuel a whole lot more, and Bert yelling at Dick over the radio. The coolant seal leaks, the Libyans, they were going to shoot it down. This was right after El Dorado Canyon. We had punished Libya for the nightclub bombing in Beirut or in Germany. Clearly it was a spy plane. The Libyans were going to shoot it down out of retaliation. All of the thunderstorms across the tropics going across Africa, the engine oil warning, the thunderstorm in the middle of the night over the Atlantic, where upset 90 degrees of bank. I mean, this was wonderful, high drama for that 13-year-old boy. And then after 8.5 days, the end is nearly in sight. And there's the engine failure off the coast of Baja California. And they glide down, towards the water. It looks like they're going to ditch. And then Dick's finally able to get the front engine started, get leveled off, and get the fuel back to the back. And then had to replumb the fuel pump in order to finish out here at Edwards Air Force Base, the center of the aerospace testing universe. So that was a deeply inspiring and influential experience for that hypothetical 13-year-old boy. And it may have strongly influenced some life choices that young man made from there on out. And I'm very happy to share that 40 years later, almost 40 years later, the story of Voyager is still inspiring the next generation of aeronautical engineering students and aspiring pilots. So prior to taking command at Edwards, I was the permanent professor of aeronautics at the Air Force Academy. And I routinely used Voyager for multiple lessons. I would introduce every single semester when I taught range and endurance, what a great exemplar to use for range and endurance, aircraft design, and very significantly, takeoff performance. When I taught takeoff performance, we would always watch the video of Voyager's takeoff. And I encourage you to go to YouTube and watch it. It is dramatic from the start. That agonizingly slow 2 minutes and 30 seconds, 87 knots, it seems like it's never going to come. And then they're still not out of the woods yet. There's that very slow acceleration to finally reach 100 knots and be wide and be able to climb out and start that flight around the world. By all rights, and by the kind of the pre-decided, pre-planned acceleration criteria, Dick should have aborted that takeoff. But he was clearly a pilot's pilot, and he always had an intuitive sense for mass-performing, delicate aircraft. He had a feeling that he could safely get airborne, and it turned out that he was proven right. And so doubtless, I'm sure lots of other folks are going to share some more aviation exploits as they speak today. And fighter pilots rule, you can probably be assured that there are at least 10% true. In Dick's case, even accounting for fighter pilots rule, he was a phenomenal pilot and was definitely deeply respected. Flying was clearly always a part of Dick's life. So on his 16th birthday, as he tells the story, he had his mom drive him to the airfield first so he could solo, and only then, after he had soloed, go and get his driver's license. And so naturally, for somebody who's obsessed with flying, the Air Force is a very logical step, and he had joined the aviation cadet program. Well, the Air Force pulled a quick one, as they are not unusually do, and they sent him to nav schools for pilot training. But he persisted and eventually made it to pilot training, where he finished first in his class and picked what he said was always his dream aircraft, the F-100 Super Sabre. So graduating from pilot training in 1967 means you're going to Vietnam. Dick flew a couple hundred F-100F missions in the South before he volunteered to take on the high-risk, fast-back missed missions in the North. He volunteered for 3 tours. ultimately, as you've already heard, completing 325 combat missions. He seemed to be thrilled by the adrenaline and that low-level, high-speed adventure. During that third tier, and actually, so Chuck Sheehan was the fastback Misty pilot with Dick. When Dick was in the back as the FAC, and Charlie was in the front on a high-speed pass. A gunner lined up a couple bullets, and their F-100 was crippled. So it's a matter of Charlie selecting an afterburner, and they're 40 miles away from the coast. It's a mad race, race to the coast. Can we burn the fuel through the engine and climb enough before all the fuel leaks out? Of course, it's on fire as well, and they get feet wet right as they hit Mach 1. And are able to kind of apex out and glide out to the coast and punch out, and then ride in the raft for a couple hours before finally getting picked up. It's interesting, the story that I heard from Dick is a little bit different than the story that I heard for Charlie, so again, I'll leave it to you. Charlie is now able to tell the story, and so you can, again, fighter pilots rule. So Dick finished that Vietnam tour. He retired from the Air Force a decade later. And then went to work for Burt as the chief test pilot for Rutan Aircraft Factory here at Mojave. And as I've heard the story told, and this one may actually be 100% true, Burt literally sketched out his idea for Voyager on a napkin during lunch with Dick in 1981. Voyager was born, and then the rest was history, to include kind of that 13-year-old boy in Ohio and what might have happened. After Voyager, the adventure was not done. Dick continued seeking adventures in the air. He attempted he attempted to go around the world again in a balloon. Wanted to be the first one to do that. Like his fastback Misty mission with Charlie, that one also ended up in a dramatic bailout. He did make another successful around the world trip with Mike Melville on an EAA friendship tour. They called it 80 Nights. So Mike and Dick had built the very first long EZs that had ever been built, and they flew those, there too, the first ones around the world on that tour, covering over 33,700 nautical miles in those 80 dives. He then dabbled in a rocket-powered EZ. He was actually at that first meeting at SCTP when I met Dick, and I asked him, hey, so what are you working on now? Again, try not to be too much of a fanboy. He was talking about organizing a rocket aircraft race around the world, which would have been pretty cool. I don't think that I never heard what came of that. So Dick clearly leaves a legacy, and the turnout here today, I think, is testament to that. There's a lot of old friends from a lot of different things, but he also leaves a legacy of inspiration for aviation adventure, and it's still continuing. And he doesn't know about this. He doesn't know about all the students I had at the Air Force Academy that now watched that takeoff from 1986 and are inspired to do what they're going to do. I expect that as long as we remember the engineering accomplishments of Wilbur and Orville and the bold achievements of people like Charles Lindbergh, we're also going to remember Dick and Burt Rutan, because there's every bit as much in that spirit. Jill Hoffman, Dick's daughter, she wrote a beautiful essay earlier this month, and it's perfectly fitting to close with her words. She wrote in the close to her essay, they say there are old pilots, and there are bold pilots, but there are no bold pilots. I would argue that there was one, and his name was Dick Rutan.
Jill is right. And isn't it wonderful how he inspired so many people? And of course, Colonel Wickard is one. Next, I would like to introduce Kelly Hall, who was Dick Rutan's administrative assistant. She worked with Dick for over 40 years. And she started out, gosh, when did we get old? pictures of her. She looks like she was 13. But anyway, that's when I first met Kelly. And we were in hangar 77. And Dan Sebovich gave that hangar to Dick to build Voyager. And they built it in 5 years. And it was rent-free. But here's Kelly.
My name is Kelly Hall. She was going to have a Kleenex up there. I worked with Dick for almost 40 years. And there were many times I told him to cry. One of the first was in 1986 when he left on the Voyager flight. And Dick said, "Edward Stour, this is Voyager 1. We're ready to go." "Roger, Voyager 1. You're cleared for takeoff. ATC cleared to Voyager 1 from Edwards Air Force Base to Edwards Air Force Base via flight plan route. Maintain 8,000. Godspeed." And as commander of the Voyager with multiple overwhelming dramatic situations, the Voyager landed back at Edwards Air Force Base 9 days, 3 minutes, and 44 seconds later. He always came back. Dick was a lifetime EAA member. His chapter decided to introduce youngsters to flight and give them a taste of the sky. Dick was always in it to win it. And during the Young Eagle Challenge, he flew the most kids in the chapter. One of those young eagles grew up, soloed, got her private pilot's license, got an instrument rating, and will soon be a commercial pilot. Then there was me, his administrative assistant. I should be a pilot if for no other reason, because I worked with Dick. I frustrated him. I admittedly have zero sense of direction, and I do not possess pilot perception, whatever that is. He would tease, "Tell me when you see an airport." I'd be looking down and time would go by, and I would miss seeing the airport. So he would say, "Tell me when you see a mountain we shouldn't fly into." It never clicked. After years of trying to learn, he said to me, "You have great intuition, but you'll never be a pilot." And I was okay with that. Of course, that made me Dick's only failed student. Dick loved to fly, and he loved being a CFI and teaching others to fly. He was so proud to cut out the back of his students' shirts as the rite of passage after they soloed. On his 16th birthday, Dick soloed under the instruction of Johnny Chikarian. And following that amazing feat, he went on to get his driver's license. 40 years, wings and wheels in the same day. 40 years later, he thought it would be great if my son soloed on his 16th birthday. So the year prior, he took my son Cody on every flight he made, to pick up airplane parts, to exercise the airplane, to grab a $100 hamburger. They'd get in November, 8545 uniform, and Dick would give Cody another lesson. The day Cody turned 16, we went out to the airport, and he and Dick flew around the patch a couple of times. They landed, and Dick got out of the airplane and gave Cody a thumbs up, and off Cody went. He did it confidently, he was prepared. And just as Dick had done 40 years prior, Cody soloed, then when he got his driver's license. Once again, wings and wheels in the same day. Instead of congratulating me, Dick simply said, "It's about time you got a pilot in your family." Later, when I had grandchildren, he took my grandson Ashton for his first flight lesson. It was an amazing day. Ashton was 10 years old, and he did great. Dick said he should continue lessons. That he had the it, I didn't. Dick would take time to talk to students and was interviewed often. He would visit classrooms and recall his adventures to the kids. They would sit in awe of him. They loved hearing about the Voyager flight around the world, and someone in the class would always ask, what'd you eat, what'd you drink, and how did you go to the bathroom? Dick was always ready to explain that part. One student, John Dorner, interviewed Dick. My favorite passage he wrote in his report was, the most interesting aspect about his job is that you get to explore and see new places all of the time. Plus, it seems to be a pretty exciting job if you like flying. I'm not sure I would recommend a flight test pilot job like he has done in the past, because he's crazy. He told me about times he was flying and had to parachute out. He got shot down in Vietnam, but they flew the fighter jet to the ocean so they wouldn't become prisoners of war. He also attempted to fly around the globe in a balloon, and after the balloon envelope exploded at 30,000 feet, they had to wait till they had fallen to 6,000 feet to bail out. This would not be the profession for me. No, the adventures Dick experienced were not for everyone. Another time, when my daughter was in elementary school, she had to bring an antique item to class for show and tell. So she brought Dick. Dick stood up in front of these kids and asked, where were you December 14th, 1986? The kids were quiet and looked confused. Then one little brave boy raised his hand and he said, I was in my crib. We had raised some money in the early 90s and Dick wanted to start giving kids scholarships. He made it clear that they didn't have to want to fly, just needed to have a dream, and he wanted to help them with their dreams. So we sent a notice to the school and they sent us 3 extraordinary candidates. They came to the office and Dick interviewed each. He was so impressed with these young people. After they left, I asked him who should get the scholarship. We had raised $1,000 in the early 90s, a real game changer for one of these high school students on the way to college. Dick didn't say anything right away. He just looked at me through a furrowed brow, kind of scared me for a second. Then he said, you're asking me to pick 2 losers? I reminded him that we had raised a $1,000 scholarship. He said, I will pay out of pocket for 2 more $1,000 scholarships. Every one of those were winners. Then he said, don't ever do that to me again. Another thing I was to never do that to him again was when I had him MC a fashion show. Dick was dyslexic, and the names of these designers did not fit into his wheelhouse. The audience loved him, and they thought he was a great comedian, as he was mispronouncing the names on purpose. And I love selling things on eBay, and I have an eBay site where I sell items to continue raising scholarship money. When Dick was getting ready to move to Idaho, he was going through his beloved ball cap collection, deciding on a few to keep and a few to give me to sell to raise scholarship money. You can find that site at Celebrity Scholarships on eBay. Shameless plug. One day, Dick had come down the stairs in a shirt that his wife, Chris, did not like. She strongly suggested that he go back upstairs and put on a different shirt. And I said, Dick, bring me that shirt when you come back down. He did. I had him autograph it, and I sold it as the shirt off Dick's back. I can sell anything. When, let me make sure I introduce. After the global Hilton attempt, flying the balloon around the world went south, Dick started building a new gondola to try again. The Brighton Orbiter beat him around the world, and Dick would, of course, not settle trying to be second. So he asked me to find a buyer for the gondola. I did. With Kathy and Al Hansen's help, we had that thing packed up on a truck and shipped to Spain. After I sold the shirt off Dick's back and then the gondola, Dick agreed that I could sell anything. Let's just say that was about 20,000 items ago. In nearly 40 years working with Dick, I have so many stories and so many memories. In 2017, Dick asked me to meet him for breakfast at Marie Callender's. He had never asked me to join him for breakfast before. During that meeting, he said, "I'm ready to write my book, and you're the only one that can help me." Of course, I agreed to this adventure. He asked how long I thought it would take. I said, I don't know, 4 months? I type really fast. I was only 2 years off. The book went to the publisher in 2019, and we had the actual book in hand, ready to sell in November of that same year. It was an incredible labor of love. It took up about every waking hour, but we worked so nicely together, and we're both so proud of the next 5 minutes. In fact, you can buy a library edition here today for $25. It's not autographed or numbered, but it's the same great book. And we've been suggesting people buy a copy or an extra copy and donate it to their local library so Dick's Adventures can get in the hands of young and young at heart everywhere. We also have interest in a Netflix series based on the book, which is so exciting. We have a screenwriter and also have a producer, but he sadly passed away before we cemented anything. The screenwriter I will bug until this Netflix series becomes a reality. And now back to more times in the last 40 years I stood on the flight line or on the tarmac telling Dick goodbye, and then I would see him when he got back. The Pond Racer flights, the EPS diesel engine airplane flights, the Global Hilton balloon flight, the Easy Rocket flights, the Long Easy flight around the world as wingman for Mike Melville, he always came back. But on May 3rd, 2024, I told my friend goodbye, knowing he wasn't coming back. I had a few words ready when we had that final call. He stopped me about halfway through and said, "Kid, the doctors will be in here soon." I told him, well, I'm not finished. I then completed my final thoughts. I thanked him for the incredible ride in his life. I told him I would do my best to keep his projects and achievements alive. I told him I would miss him and that I loved him. He said, "I love you too, kid."
Signed to her husband, and it's signed by Dick and Gina. And that will probably hang in the Hobby Transportation Museum. Now you got me going. Thank you, Mrs. Schaefer. And it is a beautiful print, and I can't remember who took that picture. Doug, did you take that picture?
Yes.
Okay, that picture was taken by Doug Shane. And that's over Soledad Mountain that they're now tearing down. But it's a beautiful, beautiful picture of Voyager. Next, I'd like for Zach Reeder to come up, and he's a test pilot for Joby Aviation, but he's a good friend of ours and good friend of Dick's, and he was flying Catbird in the formation flight. Thank you, Scott Glazier and the Airmanship Foundation for that beautiful missing man formation.
I'm going to hold it together. You got me. Kelly gets as much of my paycheck as almost anybody. Yeah, I think I have the largest collection of Voyager belt buckles in the world, thanks to Kelly. My experience with Dick sort of comes in two parts. I think, like a lot of us, you know, the Voyager was inspiring, and it definitely affected, you know, what I chose to do. The interesting thing for me is I was 5 when the Voyager landed. My dad's a pilot, engineer, flight instructor, so I knew about airplanes, but I didn't know that much at 5. I knew you took lessons in a Cessna, 747 was a jumbo jet, and Southwest Airlines were the ones that had the yummy peanuts. Boo-hoo. Terrible loss. I didn't know a lot about aviation history. You know, at 5 years old, I didn't know what World War II was. I'd never heard of Charles Lindbergh. But I had ridden in a bunch of 1 hour long Cessna flight lessons with my dad, so I knew what multiple hours in a small propeller-powered airplane was like, and I knew what 9 days meant. I mean, I remember being in school thinking, they're up there. Just incredible. So in my mind, the Voyager looms larger than Lindbergh, larger than, you know, all of these inspiring historical events that, you know, we're so moved by. But, you know, years later when I found out about the Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic, you know, it seems like small potatoes compared to this effort. And, you know, that project was not, you know, there was no prize. There was no government funding. It was, I mean, it was because it was there. And that had a profound impact on me. You know, at that age, I was just understanding that the whole cycle was you grow up, you go to school, you go to some more school, you get married, you get a job, you have a kid, leave it to Beaver. That's the shtick. And the main thing I took away from Voyager is that these normal-looking humans decided to do something else. And, like, there's no suburbs involved. And, like, it was like getting a deep secret that you don't have to do the thing. You know, you can do whatever. And so, that was, you know, I feel like that project, not just Dick, but all of you guys that did that, set that trajectory for me. And so, went to school, you know, did those steps. But then when I got to the step where you moved to the suburbs, I moved here, which was a different break, largely thanks to Doug, who let me in the door. And went to work for Bird at Scaled, and got to do some amazing stuff as an engineer. I showed up in Mojave with like 45 hours and a private pilot's license, and just started playing with airplanes as hard as possible, and Dick was a fixture around the airport. And, you know, obviously he's got this, you know, is famous for this sense of adventure, and, you know, everybody presumes fearless. And one of the most impactful things for me is that Dick was scared of a lot of stuff, and systematically, you know, he was the first person I heard say, well, it's scary to fly over mountains at night with only one engine. And well, this guy flew around the world on one engine. What do you mean you're scared? And I think his influence on the flight test culture, both in being bold enough to go, but being systematic, and afraid's not the right word, but cautious enough to protect yourself. That balance is how I think a bunch of the progress is made. And I know Doug learned a lot from Dick. Mike is famous for learning a lot from Dick. And I think a lot of the way we do flight test in Mojave especially, can trace its roots back to that balance of, you know, you can be perfectly safe in 5 years, but those aren't the programs that we're dealing with. And I think that overall philosophy is permeating so much of what we learn and we know. And so that was impactful coming to Mojave, but I also think getting to know Dick personally was, for me, like not just meeting Lindbergh, not just meeting Jaeger or, you know, all of these characters, but I mean, he was approachable and accessible. Like, you could be friends with your childhood hero. Like, what if Lindbergh wanted to hang out with you? And in 2010, Jim and I rebuilt the Capitol that Dick set a world record in, Mike set a world record in. And I feel like my coming of age moment was I was flying around the airport in a Capitol doing, you know, speed powers or whatever, and Dick calls on the radio, Catbird, Berkut 1, permission to come aboard. Like it was an official thing that we were doing together. And then all of a sudden, Dick slides in, clean and dry checks me out, everything's fine, looks it over, hangs out, and you know, as peers. And I can't describe how, like, empowering that was. And, you know, to be, like, validated by someone that you respected so much. And he did this to all of us. Like, he wasn't, an unapproachable celebrity. He was part of the community. I think that was one of the things that was so special. And he also was like, curious. He wasn't, you know, he would do that kind of hunched over thing where he was, like, excited about something. You know, he was a systematic experimenter. When he talked about the balloon stuff, you know, he put himself in a pipe to measure his gas exchange, like just imagining, you know, him crawling in an 18-inch pipe in his hangar by himself with all kinds of instrumentation. But I think that also, like, sets an example for, you know, we're not just here to fly, we're not just here to build stuff, we're here to be curious and learn about it. So that is just an ongoing example. I think one of the other moments that I'll never forget was one time Dick was cool. I mean, he was a cool guy. And we were up in Idaho, and we had gone out to this country and western bar with Tanya and Chris and some of the other ladies. I think Bert stayed home, and, you know, we're just kind of sitting on the side listening to music, having a beer, and these pretty healthy Idaho girls came and grabbed me and Dick and drug us out on the dance floor. And, you know, we're dancing or whatever, and I look over at Dick, and again, in my mind, this is greater than Lindbergh, greater than Jaeger, this is Dick Rutan. We're dancing with these girls, and he gives me the low thumb, but we still got it thumb. And, like, that may be the coolest I've ever been. It's a low bar, but anyway, I think, you know, in literature, heroes serve as distilled archetypes of an ethos. And Dick was the first person that I ever met that was just, he was really straightforward about, I'm going to go ahead and just be a hero. And he just filled that role to be an example. It was almost like a consumable. Like, I did all this stuff, let me tell you what I'm about. I'm about the adventure, I'm about the prep, I'm about the curiosity, and then I'm about sharing it. And I think one of the things I struggle with, I know all of us grew up reading stories about our heroes, amazing pilots, all these adventures. And, you know, there's two ways that you can go. You can put posters of them on your wall, or you can try to follow in their footsteps. And the thing about having heroes that are accessible like Dick is they encourage you to follow in their footsteps. And so, you know, I feel really blessed to have known him and to have done some of the things he's done. I got to set a record in the same Capitol he did. I crashed an AM2 in the Arctic with Ron Sheardown with Kathy Hanson's cookies on board. Never fly with Ron in the Arctic with Kathy's cookies. But I got to do that. And then I got to call Dick afterwards and tell him, like, hey, what kind of profanity did Ron use on you? Oh yeah, me too. And Ron's not doing it. But, so I think one of the big takeaways for me was that all of these adventures, all these stories, you know, you can try to outdo your buddies, but that doesn't serve any purpose because you lose it when you're dead. The main goal is to collect all those things into a set of ideas that you think are valuable, and then put it in a form that is disseminatable, that you can share with the next group of people that are going to care about those things. And for me, that's the enduring legacy of Dick, is not just the way he lived his life, but the way that he gave it extended meaning by putting value on sharing all the things that he was about. And so, you know, as we go forward, I hope we can carry on some of those same ideas. Thanks.
Right on, Seth. Yeah, it was my cookies that sunk me in too at the North Pole. Dick liked cookies that were really crisp, so he got them. And I always seem to burn the last batch. I don't know why, but I'd say those cookies are 50 for 10. And Al would get mad because he liked them that way too. So anyway, I made up a batch of cookies, and I told him, well, next time, Asian food cake. Anyway, Chuck Coleman has some good stories about Dick. He got to fly to Oshkosh with him at least once. And so, Chuck, do you want to come up and tell your story? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Inspiration of 13-year-old kid from Ohio, inspired. Grade school, Zach did it. I was in my early 20s, and I had my first job at McDonnell Aircraft. It's now another company. But as a fresh college engineering grad, and moved on to St. Louis and worked on the F-18, F-15, all these other planes like that. And then 1986 came along, and every night you'd go home and watch on the news, ooh, where is he around the world? Where is the Voyager going on? So I like to ask, I've talked to a few of you. How many people here worked on the Voyager? Can I see a hands? Look at all that. 4 years ago, we're talking. 4 years ago. And a lot of that was volunteers. And it's kind of the EA spirit, Experimental Aircraft Association spirit, where they come together and they have this idea. And Hangar 77 over there is where it happened. And in reading Kelly Hall's book, and Kelly wrote a lot of it with Dick, they call what's called a magic door in Hangar 77. And that's where, wow, I got some mentions for you, avionics, electrical, everything like that. And it's just incredible them how they produce this like that. So, okay, a dozen or so worked on the Voyager. Who saw it fly in person in the room? Is there anybody? Okay, that I never got to see it fly. I was back in St. Louis watching it on TV and didn't get to fly. But I'm going, wow, that's just an amazing thing. 9 days they went around the world, and that's so. 86, I go 87. The Voyager's going to be at Oshkosh, Wisconsin, a great event of all things. And I went there, and you know, I'm in my early 20s and had to drive, but I actually had a job where I had enough money to get a license, so I soloed and drove up to Oshkosh and met with Bert Rutan. Then I was going through some of my pictures. I had a nice Nikon camera, and I took a lot of pictures. This is Oshkosh 87, and the wings there and there, and there's Dick and Gina and everybody. And then I talked to Bruce about him, the crew chief of it, and I go, wow, were you there? And he says, yeah, that's the back of my head right there. So Bruce was indeed there. And so we're talking 37 years ago now, Oshkosh. And what I found is, wow, okay. Then I worked in a McDonnell, great airplanes, all that stuff like that. And then I saw some smaller companies to go to. And going to Oshkosh and seeing all the home-built airplanes and things, just, I want to do one of those too. And then in Oshkosh 87, I see Sally's there, and I should have planned the long ECs, but I bought an RV3 kit. a set of plans for that. I never ended up building it, but anyway, Oshkosh was the place to be. And so here I am, early 20s, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And okay, I want to get a pilot license, I want to build an airplane, I want to do all this stuff, and talk about inspiration that the kids have. You're still a kid in your 20s in my book to do that. So in 87, and then I've returned every single year to Oshkosh, so we're coming up on my 36th time at Oshkosh, and I've flown a lot of planes. I flown a Lancer 4P that I built, composite airplane, if you're familiar, back in the 90s. And actually I was working on a program called the Visionary Advantage. Doug Shane made the first flight with John Kirko. And I came out here in the Lancer 4P, and all of a sudden, hey, let's go flying. So Dick Rutan flew in the Lancer, Bert Rutan, Doug Shane, John Kirko, I don't know if you remember, but Mike Melville, all these people flew with me. And then the next day of all things, Bert says, hey, let's go for a flight in the Boomerang. So we kind of got a nice exchange of rides. I flew the Boomerang with Dick. And so you're looking at, wow, I built a composite plane, I flew it to Mojave and flew with the Rutans, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I get some points there. And in the early 2000s, they were looking for someone to come out to Mojave, and I got a call, and Doug actually called me, and Bert was about it, and so I came out to Mojave, and I go, wow, you know, that's where the Voyager was, that's where the Rutans do all their amazing stuff. Let's see. Okay, and then Dick Rutan, I had hangers down at the West End, and he would hang out, we always talked, and we'd go flying. And I've flown in with Dick in 7 different types of airplanes and that, I flew it. And actually one year I flew to Oshkosh with Dick Rutan. So I got a lot of stories like Zach and everybody have. But, you know, it's like Zach was saying that, wow, this is the hero, and you meet your hero, and wow, he's better than you think he is when you meet this type of hero. And that's what Dick was. And then early on when I got out to scale composites, I was assigned, well, I was flying the Proteus, and that's a great airplane too, but then you want to do engineering and building and things like that. So the Global Flyer was my role on that. And so like the Colonel said, that's a predecessor to this, was the Global Flyer was the thing. And I see Bob Morgan, Clint Nichols in the audience, and then the only 2 others were Joe Ruddy and John Carper, who's no longer with us. And so we said, we're gonna make a faster Voyager around the world, and it ended up doing it in 2.5 days or so, type of thing. But what I ended up doing as an engineer, and I build airplanes, is I was looking at the videos of the Voyager flight off of Edwards and everything, and you see the wingtips drooping onto the ground and everything, and then scraping on the takeoff. And then even when the winglets were on, there was a vent at the top of the winglet, and there was someone who put their finger in the hole because the wing was lower than the vent, so the fuel was draining out. I go, well, that's not going to happen on the Global Flyer. So when I did the engineering is I took the vent all the way inboard, so if the wingtips were to drop, it wouldn't vent out. So I learned at least that from the Voyager, and it kind of made it look easy. 2.5 days, I mean, compared to a 9-day, 3-minute flight that Dick and Gina did, and it's kind of like, wow, we learned from the Voyager what to do and to make it, wow, that was an easy thing to do. So I'm real proud of that too. And I heard of Dick's passing back in May, and I now have a Long Easy that I didn't build, but it's an amazing craft. You're sitting there flying at 12,005, or I've had mine up to 21,000 or so, and you're looking at the gauge and it says remaining fuel, and we got like 12 hours remaining fuel in it. So you go, wow, I can go like thousands of miles in this airplane. So what an incredible thing that was in the mid-70s or so that happened. So another Rutan type of thing. And I'm one of 5 board of directors of the Mojave Airport, and I want to continue that type of environment, type of thing. So look at the history of the airport here. 1935, it became the Mojave Airport. Pearl Harbor came, all of a sudden the Marines came in and they took over, they ran operations, and then it returned in the 50s back to the Mojave Airport. A man named Dan Sabovich came here in 1972 and kind of said, wow, what a great place, and established things. Bert Rutan came here in 74 with the Rutan Aircraft Factory, and he was so welcoming, he says, I want to stay here and do it. And so the lineage of all of the Rutan planes and Bert's planes came from Mojave, and it's just that magical type of place that had that magic door at the Hangar 77. So flying along easy, 8-9 hour flights, listening to Kelly's Hall the next 5 minutes and just reminiscing on, wow, what was it like and everything like that. So what kind of stands out is Dick's adventure is the essence of life, and that was a common thing he told all of us. And Zach is a little kid, and the 13-year-old kid, I guess, too, and the 21-year-old kid, and there's probably more you like this, that we want to continue on doing adventures like Dick did. And I was proud of that day came at the board of director meeting, we voted to put at Rutan Field as the thing, and that's a great thing that is well deserved by the Rutans. So, thanks for
Wetz here, former Mojave Air and Spaceport General Manager, and he's got some great stories. He was good friends with Dick Rutan. So, Stu?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's kind of surreal to be here to talk about Dick and share so many memories with so many fine people at this amazing place and the history. And we all share in that history. And the biggest thing I was thinking of is we all grew up reading novels in school. And I remember when our English teacher made us read Henry David Thoreau's Walden Pond. And Henry David Thoreau, the sum of that entire book was talking about a line in the book, the masses of men who lead lives of quiet desperation. Obviously, he had never met the people in this room, and certainly not the Rutan brothers and Dick Rutan. Because the people in this room probably haven't had a boring day in their life, because we came to Mojave to share in some of the adventures as youngsters. My first cross country at age 16 was from Inyokern to Mojave. And there wasn't much here in 1969, the tumbleweeds. But look at it today. And a lot of it's that influence of the Rutan brothers. Probably the majority of it's the influence of the Rutan brothers. But I know that the stories of aviation and all of us, I mean, I bore you to death with stories of Dick pulling up in front of the office and waving at me to come out and get in the front seat of a J3 Cub. So I go out there and I said, what are you doing? And the engine's running. He said, I don't have any brakes and I can't add power. And he started out, he said, get in the front, we're going to Cal City. We got to buy some 80-octane fuel. He said, you fly it. And I said, Dick, I haven't flown a J3 Club since college, and that's been 35 years towing banners down the beach. And he said, well, you can handle it. Well, rates got a little out of control on takeoff. I went cross-country off of runway 8. Finally got airborne. Got over to Cal City. It didn't get any prettier, let me tell you. I went off into the other side of the runway and landing, and the rates were still out of control, and I was still trying to catch up. Of course, no ICS, nothing in the airplane, and I laid around and get it slowed down, and I said, Dick, whose airplane did I almost crash with us in it? He's kind of quiet. He says, it belongs to some friend of Vic's. I'm thinking, I said, Vic who? He said, I don't know his last name. Only in Mojave, folks. But what a ride. And the thing that I think Dick and I enjoyed so much, man, I just can't remember how many airplanes we flew together, including the one I currently fly, my Mooney. When I bought it out of a barn, and that Mooney hadn't flown in 23 years. And I'd spent a year taking it apart. I had every roller bearing out of everything, every push rod out of that airplane, put it all back together, and I said, it's time to try it. And I said, Dick, I haven't flown a Mooney either since 1968, I think. And so he drove up to Mojave, or to Iñucurna, flying with me and checked me out. And gear light didn't work, of course. It's always something minor like that. And so anyway, I got it back on the ground. That was my sign-off to fly my Mooney. That's now just a wonderful airplane. But the thing that Dick and I enjoyed together the most is I've always raised bird dogs, German Shorthairs. And I didn't know Dick liked to hunt quail, pheasant, chukar. And so he probably didn't bore you with the stories of hunting quail, but Dick always wanted to shoot down a mig. So he called the quail and the chukar migs. And we'd be out there and we'd be getting out of the truck, and I said, what are you going to do with all those bullets? He said, every time a bird gets up, this thing holds 3 shells. I'm shooting 3 times. Every time. And that's what he did. And it had nothing to do with getting birds. By God, he was going to shoot 3 times at every one that got up on point. Or going, you know, when he'd call up and he'd say, hey, let's go, we'll take the snowmobiles and go to Mammoth for a couple days. Well, all I did was smell the exhaust from his snowmobile. Because he only knew one speed, and that was wide open. I don't know which way we were going. And it was always a fun ride, as y'all know. I mean, it was, again, the spirit of Mojave. But I know I've heard about comments, and the other day, a Saturday morning, I was in Vancouver, Canada, on Saturday morning about 7 o'clock with Susie. And earlier in the week, we had been in San Diego, and actually a week before, and Sunday morning, we went to the zoo. We hadn't been to the zoo since our kids were little bitty kids, and we said, let's go to the zoo. So we did, and on the way to the zoo, my phone beeped, and I looked at it, and it was Dick. And it was Sunday, and I said, how about this? So I answered it, and it was one of those calls, like Kelly was describing. And I said, Dick, I get it. And we had a moment, and that led to a number of texts over the course of the week. And that's next Saturday morning, I was in Vancouver, and it was pretty early in the morning, about 6, and I got the word, and I sent a note to Forger, and we ended up texting back and forth for the next few hours there, very deeply personal thoughts of the course of that week from our buddy Dick. And Dick was Dick all the way to the end, and I just thank God for the time I had with our friend Dick Rutan. Thanks for coming out.
Of these stories. Brian Zenberg is past president of SATP. He's now the chief of operations at Jody, but he's going to speak to us now.
Thank you all. As Kathy said, I am the immediate past president of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots, which also makes me the executive advisor to the board of directors. And I'm speaking on behalf of the board of directors and the society. There are at least 3 other past presidents in the audience today, so I'm just the most recent one. I had to do. Dick joined SETP in 1979, and so that means that he was able to get an application through from his experience through the membership committee of members of SETP that are empowered to bring members in either as associate members or as members. Dick joined as a member in 1979. He was a frequent presenter of all of the adventures that he was having with his brother, all of the different stories, different aircraft. I just did a quick scan, and the Rutans and a lot of you other scaled and Rutan aircraft company people have been presenting at SETP for many, many years. He became a fellow of the society in 2014. Now, fellows are selected by other fellows, so this is a peer recognition of the very, very top test pilots in the world. And they are selected approximately 10 or 15 a year, and in 2014, Dick got that honor. So moving on to some personal stories about Dick. So let's see, Doug was 13 and Zach was 5. I was 11 on 23 December 1986. And so you're thinking about Christmas and you're thinking about what an 11-year-old thinks about that time of season. But I was aware that it was going on. I was aware that the flight was about to end. And we were sitting at the gate outside of Edwards trying to get on base like a couple hundred other people that just figured out that this might be something to come see. So the gate was completely bogged down, being the Christmas holiday. And I remember distinctly that we saw a couple of the passes that he made. Very famously made several passes instead of just one nice safe landing to end the flight. Eventually somebody on the base gave up and said, yeah, go ahead and just let everybody in. And it was off to the races to see if we could actually catch the landing. And then the press conference afterwards that we were able to sneak into. So I was aware of the Rutans, and Dick's exploits just by growing up here in the valley and seeing the backwards looking airplanes flying around, all these weird shapes, and was always aware as a young kid. And absolutely I was inspired, like has been mentioned, to join this industry and to become a test pilot myself. The next time I distinctly remember running into Dick was in 2004 when I was serving at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he was being inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame at the Museum of the Air Force. Now, he was actually put in 2002, so he was either there because he was finally getting the opportunity to have the ceremony, or he was just there because he was one of the inductees. But either way, I was a student at the Air Force Institute of Technology, and a couple of the younger students were charged with escorting him around. And I remember that at one point he leans over and he says, how come it's just a bunch of dudes escorting me? Sorry. Didn't know that was a thing. So that was, he was certainly a personality, and I know a lot of other stories that some of you have about that. And then at SCTP, once I became a member and was going to symposia on a regular basis, I mentioned that he was a frequent attendee and presenter. But one of the most crystallizing moments in my mind was when the Soarin' Over California ride opened, and we're in line, and you look up, and there's Dick on the wall, and there he is in line to get on the ride to go at Disneyland California Adventure. That was a pretty amazing moment. You talk about some hero worship. That was pretty cool. And then, of course, many years just flying up to Voyager to grab a sandwich, and he'd be holding court, waiting there just in case anybody came by, so he could very famously say, "Hey, I'm Dick. I flew around the world." I know you all got that introduction to him many times. So, again, on behalf of the society, he will be greatly missed after taking his last flight. Thank you.
I thought I recognized his name.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. And I love SCTP, and I remember when it was at the Bonaventure, and before that, at the Beverly Hilton. That was a long time ago. Anyway. Doug Shane is now the head of aircraft development at, I don't know that I pronounce this correctly, Anduril Industries. Well, I'll let him tell you about it. But he was part of the Voyager team, and he's wearing his Voyager shirt. There he is. And he did some really important things. And he took a lot of great pictures, too. There's one picture, I think, did you take a picture of him over the runway where it says Mojave? Somebody else took that. I love that picture, too, but I don't know that photo. That's great. Thank you.
I tried the t-shirt memo, but I have my old Voyager Cub Scout uniform. Official uniforms back in the day. I think, at the risk of lapsing into sentimentality, I will instead try to tell you things that are less sentimental or frightening. First of all, there are all
these romantic notions about Voyager and what marvelous accomplishments and how it was such a wonderful thing. It inspired so many people. It was hell. When you're in the middle of something like that, all you want to do is be done. Because, I mean, the emotions, the tensions, the technical difficulties, they're always broke, always begging for money. I mean, that's the kind of environment that it really was. And so, like I learned from Bert over the course of all those years, programs are normally found about 5 years after they're over. And you look back in retrospect. And Voyager was the most rewarding thing that I ever worked on. So, let's see. Well, I'm just going to take random shots here. So, Kelly, I met at Cody's Corner back in 1982 when she was running that little snack shop next door to the original Scale, which was in across the street from the hospital building downtown here in Mojave. But one thing I want to say, she read that eloquent line from Dick's book about, you know, how the tower came back and said, Voyager, you're cleared Edwards to Edwards via flight plan, Godspeed, etc. What the thing that preceded that was Dick calling up Edwards ground, Voyager 1, like to pick up our IFR clearance, Edwards to Edwards the hard way. That was even a better line than what the guy came back with, I thought. Yeah, so I mean, I got to go hang out with the Voyager folks a lot, do a lot of chase, flew chase on one of the chase airplanes. I mean, there were an armada of them, as you can well imagine, but takeoff and then went to Africa and landing. So I got to see it all three places, and I can absolutely vouch for the fact that they flew around the world non-stop, and it was them who did it. So that's cool. And in case anybody ever asks again, Dick was going 10 knots slower than he said, and I'll just leave it at that. Dick was our first chief test pilot at Scale, although I don't know that he ever really had that title. I mean, we were such in our infancy that there really wasn't a flight ops group yet. So, and Dick did the first flight of the Starship concept airplane 41 years ago, or some unbelievable amount of time ago. But what he brought to us, and those of you that work there know, the flight maintenance schedule form and the 781 light maintenance forms, those all came from Dick setting up the test ops group at Scale for the first time. He got us into the Edwards altitude chamber. We did parachute training at Edwards, courtesy of Dick's connections. And then got us fitted out with personal gear, flight systems, and that sort of thing. So that he really was, he really did set the stage for so much of what we all did after that. I got to take a lot of my instrument training with Dick, and he was a terrific instrument instructor. Any of you guys that ever got a chance to fly with him, he really, all the bravado and all the macho crap, I mean, it all vaporized as soon as he sat down in the cockpit. He was just total business, total pro, great to fly with. We had a ball. And I will note too that there are a couple other good instrument instructors in this crowd, one of them being Chuck Coleman, and another one being Jeff Holder that I ran across earlier, so just kudos to you guys. Yeah. Well, so you've seen maybe little pieces about the Cessna 150 that Dick had, 4.5 uniform, that we all knew and loved, and it was sort of ubiquitous on the Mojave scene. I had bought a Cessna 150, and Bob Williams and I used to fly it around every now and again. And so I bought a can of Spam to put on the dashboard, and my airplane became Spam 1, and his was Spam 2. But what Dick told me after I got the airplane, he says, you know, when you fly a Cessna 150, you always got to carry a pocket full of rocks. And I said, really? Why? He says, so you have something to throw back at it after you walk away. Yeah, that was a good one. Another favorite saying, I'm sure all of you have heard, it's darker than the inside of a cow. That was a really famous one, I thought. He was really glad when I decided to put my first two initials as the letters of my N number, Delta Bravo, instead of my first and last names, Delta Sierra, because it says you don't want it to be dog shit. So it's Delta Bravo, and that's why. I really don't want to remember. You know, one thing, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to see it, but if you do see it, there's a great documentary on the Misties that came out, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And I was fortunate enough to attend that with Pam Tackerberry, Paul's widow. And Dick has some great cameos in that. And sir, I understand you're a Misty, and so I send greetings from Anne, and anybody else here who is associated with that, because she feels, she really wanted to be here today, and she felt a very special bond to that group, so thank you. And I guess, well, you know, faster and funnier is always better. So, oh, no, wait, I do have one other story. So, Dick, the great balloon pilot, right? He said, Doug, you want to go fly the balloon with me tomorrow morning? I said, sure. Okay, meet me at wherever it was, whatever time. So we got to California City, and I had never been in a balloon before. And it was in the days of, you know, the little tiny Garmin GPSs that you could get ground speed and track out of and whatnot. And I learned how cool it was, you know, to pick up and play the winds so that you could control your ground course. And you know, we flew around for like an hour. We took off out of the jump zone, the drop zone at Cal City. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And we came back, we were just about in the exact same place we took off, except as we got close to the ground, there was a bush the size of a Buick. I mean, this big, dense bush. And we're heading right for it. And Dick just looked at me and says, hang on, I've done all I can. And I thought, there's the great Dick Rutan. I think we were almost horizontal. I'll never forget that. I'll leave you with the cautionary words that he gave many of us over time. Always put your gear down before you land.
That's great. Thanks, Doug. Glenn Graham is with the Detalians, and that's a fellowship for military aviators. And, you know, they like to get together and talk flying. And what is it, shoot their watch? But anyway, here's Glenn.
Thank you, everybody. It's great hearing all these stories. I think my perspective of how I met and got to know Dick is a little bit different. I never got to hang out. I didn't know much about the hobby until just recently. But as Kathy said, my name is Glenn Graham. I go by Dudley. When I first came to the Antelope Valley as a new test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base in 1997, like everybody else, I'd heard of Dick. He was a figure that was larger than life. I'd heard about his record-breaking flight in Voyager. I knew that he'd been shot down in Vietnam. And I knew that his brother made really cool airplanes in Mojave, but that's about it. I met Dick for the first time at the Edwards Air Force Base Okla later that year during a meeting of the group, as Kathy said, to Dalians, which I'm now fortunate to be the flight captain, which is kind of like the chairman. Dick had been a lifetime member when I got there since 1973, and so he really valued that organization. For those of you who've never heard of it, it's an organization of military pilots and aircrew that dates back to World War I. Its mission is to promote military aviation, education, citizenship, and charity, but really, as Kathy said, it's just to tell war stories and camaraderie. And the guys there are a great bunch of folks, and Dick was key to the chapter that we had. And that's how I got to meet Dick. My first impression after getting just kind of seeing him act with him was obviously he was a war hero, he was a patriot, a record setter and advocate for what he believed in, and a visionary who never settled. As Zach said, I think he talked about Dick's ethos. And I think that really rings true for everything that he stood for. So, even though I never worked with him, and sadly, I never got to fly with him, after 27 years and about five assignments at or near Edwards over my Air Force career with this group, and after listening to many, many flying stories from Dick, I consider him a good friend. His passing is obviously a great loss to this community and for the aviation world at large. I remember one time I showed up late to the Dalians meeting because I'd been flying. There was only one empty chair that was at his table, so I sat down. He was in the middle of the story, as he usually was. It was about being stranded somewhere and he was really mad at the guy in charge for not following protocols. And there was something about not having enough seats in the plane, so he had to stay on the ice overnight with another guy, and nothing was sleeping bag. You can see the pictures in the slides. I couldn't figure out what he was talking about, because again, I came in kind of halfway through the story. But it sounded like it had just happened. I finally stopped him and asked, when was this? He answered, last night. So I said, so you're saying you were stranded on the North Pole last night and you're here now, like 12 hours later? He's like, yep. Just matter of fact, like it was nothing. So I needed a beer. I just couldn't get over how to him that was just another day at the office, but for any other human being, that would have been a significant emotion to him. Another time I remember him and Mike Melville talking about their 1997 trip around the world in the Wamizis. I remember Dick describing how they left Brazil in formation right around sunset with towering cumulus clouds all around their two tiny aircraft bound for Africa, and how when they reached Africa, the airport was closed so they couldn't land, and I think Mike had engine problems. And again, it was all just a matter of fact, just another day in the office for Dick Rutan. And I'm like, that's just crazy. One more story that I vividly remember Dick telling was how he came off a target in Vietnam and went to rejoin on his Misty wingman because the crew weren't answering the radio calls. When Dick pulled up beside the other airplane, the cockpit was fully engulfed in fire, and neither of the crewmen were able to eject. I remember Dick saying that not being able to do anything for his comrades at that moment was one of the toughest things he ever had to endure. It so happens that Dick's son-in-law, Lars Hoffman, and I were classmates at the Air Force Academy, and so we knew each other, and our spouses knew each other. So I took the liberty, as Eager talked to earlier. I spoke with Jill last week and told her that I was doing this, and I asked her if there was anything she'd like me to say about Dick, since she couldn't be here. First, she pointed me to the Instagram feed where she shares her last conversation with her dad. That's what Colonel Lippert talked about. And I encourage you, if it's still up, you guys should go look at it. It's a good read. The other thing she said was very telling. Jill and her husband live in D.C., and Dick would typically travel there a couple times a year. The first thing he'd do when he got into town religiously, every time he goes to D.C., according to Jill, was that he goes and sees his friends at the Vietnam Memorial. And he walks by and he touches their names, and he just spends time there. And generally he would take Jill and her grandkids to go do that. The second thing that he'd always do, according to Jill, is that he'd go to the Air and Space Museum and just stand under his airplane without telling anyone who he was for long periods of time. And he told Jill that whatever they do, they can't take the fact that I built that airplane and flew it around the world. And they can't take that away from me. I think those two tidbits say a lot about the man we knew as Dick. Jill also said that his life was about adventure, which obviously I think we can all figure that out. And she said, I asked her about the North Pole incident. She said, yeah, even while he was sitting on the ice watching the rest of the team fly away, he said, what a great effing adventure this is. So, tidbit, maybe you guys know this. Joe said he'll be interned with his friends at Arlington in about a year from now. Those are their permanent plans. And so what I'd like to do in closing is, if you have a glass, I'm just going to raise a glass to Dick. And here's a toast. A toast to the host of those who love the vastness of the sky. To a friend we send the message of his brother when you fly. We drink to those who gave their all of old. From down we roar to score the rainbow's hot gold. A toast to the host of the men we boast in the U.S. Air Force, Andy Dick.
now would like to say a few words, give a little sister story. Dick was the big brother, and I'm going to hand a microphone down there, and Daniel can take it to Nell.
Thank you. We knew him before any of you ever heard of him.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd tell you a couple of stories. I'll be brief. I have notes so I don't wander off. I have two brothers. One is older than me and one is younger than me. For my whole life, I've referred to them as my big brother and my little brother. When I was born in Oregon, we lived on a small farm. When I was an infant, my mother gave my big brother a job. He stood on a chair next to the kitchen sink and the counter, and his job, which he's done a couple of times before, was to hold on to the baby to keep her from moving while she prepared the bathing instruments. He did this a couple of times very successfully, but on this particular day, while my mother was preparing the bathing accessories, my big brother took the salt shaker and filled both of my eye cavities with salt. Thank goodness we were at the sink. Okay, fast forward. Oh, and by the way, Dick was 4 years old when he stood on that chair. He was my big brother. Fast forward, we moved from Oregon to Los Angeles. After the war, my father got the GI Bill and got to enroll in the USC dental school in Los Angeles. We lived in student housing, and again, my big brother was given a job. He'd been in school a couple of years, but this was going to be my first experience going to school. And his job was to walk me home from school. Well, he had his buddies, and now he has to walk his sister home from school. So he told me on the first day, when we were getting ready to walk back to it was different in those days. It was much safer in Los Angeles. So he told me, you need to walk 10 paces behind me so that I can walk with my buddies and walk us home. Fast forward. We moved from Los Angeles to Dinuba. Dinuba is a town southeast of Fresno. That's where my father's going to open his dental practice. They needed a dentist in Dinuba. So he was very successful there. And things changed for us quite a lot. You already heard about Dick getting his driver's license and his pilot's license on the same day when he was 16. Well, when he was 17, he was the big man on campus at the high school. And he got himself a motorcycle. So my big brother was the one that taught me how to be a passenger on a motorcycle. so we get on the motorcycle and tool around town. At one point, he makes a big sweeping left turn, leaning the bike in. He leaned in, I leaned the other way. He said, no, you do not lean the other way. You lean into the curves. I think that may have established what my big brother stood for. He always leaned into the curves. Thank you.
Thank you, Nell. Those are great stories. I had never heard those. Of course, he wouldn't tell them. That's great. We now have a video from his little brother and your little brother, Bert. Yeah.
My brother Dick was 5 years older than me. Now, if it was 4 years, we would have gone to high school together. But at 5 years, your kid brother, you never go to high school with him. And we both always had a different set of friends. I'll never forget that when he was 16, the day he was 16, he soloed, and immediately it was clear that he was really focused on honing his flying skills. The start of his goal to have the velvet arm unmatched by any other in the universe. He didn't say that then, but I know he was thinking it. At 18, he took a solo trip in a motorcycle. He left home, didn't tell anybody where he was going. I don't think he knew where he was going. It was his first real demonstration of the desire for adventure. I think he decided one day at a time where to go. I'll definitely never forget when I first had an opportunity to impress my big brother. I was 13 years old, and just then I was learning. I was doing model airplane contests, and I was bringing home trophies. Just as that started, Brother Dick left for good. He joined the Air Force, went off and learned to be a navigator. So I never got to impress him with the things that I thought were accomplishments. I'll never forget when Dick, at his first wedding afterwards, he came out, took me aside, and he looked at me and he says, "Bert, don't you ever smoke tobacco." Well, his first job after Air Force retirement was to work for me, to work for his kid brother. That was going to be tough because I was developing airplanes, and it was important to me that they're flown safely. Because if they're not flown safely, I could lose everything I had because of lawsuits. or accidents. But Dick would take my very easy, he'd fly it up to Mount Whitney, and he'd go down on the Kern River, right off the water, and fly all the way to Bakersfield. If the engine hiccuped, not only would he die, but it would have been very difficult to find the wreckage. He also did aerobatics in an airplane that I never approved for aerobatics. It was important for him to show off his flying skills. So important that it was just his passion. He took the Starship prototype that we were testing for Beechcraft. And when the Beach Boys weren't looking, he'd come down the taxiway right at Mojave, pull up and do a triple aileron roll. Now this is a business airplane. It's not approved for aerobatics. It's not intended to be flown that way. I remember that when Dick he took every one of my pilots at RAF and at Scale, and he taught them how to fly just like his velvet arm skills. He taught everyone how to fly formation. He focused on sharing with them his skills. And, you know, Mike Melville would have never been an astronaut if it weren't for Dick training him. Never forget how Dick took on that challenge of round-the-world non-refuel, the Voyager flight. He shared with me later that he thought that it was likely that he would die during that flight. That's because we had failures with it many times when the airplane couldn't stay level flight, and yet it was heading off over all the big oceans. Before that flight, he set up a camera and made a film in which it was to be played if he didn't get back from the Voyager flight. And what it said, I never saw the film, but I'm told what it said was that the blame for the accident was solely his. No one else should be blamed, and no one else should sue anybody. I'll never forget Dick's long adventures in his Long Easy. He flew from Alaska to the Caribbean, which required the same 34 hours that Lindbergh took to go from New York to Paris in 1927. He didn't have an autopilot, which means if you fall asleep, you're going to die. Dick just assumed, hey, if Lindbergh could do it, obviously I can. I left Mojave as a young person, 67 years old. I left it and decided to retire mainly because I had a damaged heart and I was not in good health. I tried to get Dick to consider leaving the desert and coming up to more beautiful surroundings, like you can see behind us here. I even told him, Dick, dying in Mojave is redundant. redundant. But Dick didn't listen to that because his main reason for being there was the friends that he had there. Dick didn't seem to realize that anywhere in the world that he would go, he had friends, many friends, because he lived a life that people respected him and wanted to be his friend. Well, I'll never forget the day that he decided that he will move from the desert. A person's health has a lot to do with what he worries about. And I think the fact that he had some bouts of bladder cancer really got to him. He wouldn't admit it. He'd say, no problem, I've licked this, it's not a problem. But I think that had a lot to do with his decision to live the rest of his life in different weather, different surroundings, not the dusty big wind. When he moved up here 3.5 years ago, I finally got an opportunity to truly bond with my brother. Once here, we became very best friends. For those years, Dick and I did everything together. Everything we did together. We had the same group of friends. Then, this year, I'll never forget watching him go through a health issue that was tried to be cured and then deemed to be uncurable. He knew well before he died that he had a lung problem, a lung disease that was not curable. And watching him every day get weaker and battle with that, and watch how strong he was to battle with it, was amazing. And the thing that I'll never ever forget was the hours that we spent with Dick on the day that he passed. He had oxygen being pumped into him so fast, at such rate, that if he pulled the cannulas, his air would pass out. It was done to keep him conscious. And conscious. My God, hours before he passed, Dick looked healthy. He looked healthier than me. He chatted, he reminisced. And he had a request. And his request was, if there's a memorial. Yeah, if there's a memorial. He said, it's got to be in a hangar, surrounded by airplanes. And no one there should be dressed more formally in a t-shirt. we're planning that kind of a event up here on the 29th of June. And it's going to be very specifically what Dick asked for. And I hope all of you can come up and join us at a huge hangar at an airport just north of Coeur d'Alene. I miss you, brother. I love you. And I'll never forget the wonderful times we had together.
Thank you, Bert. I remember when Bert sent me that video and I watched it, and then I watched it again and again. And I've watched this slideshow that has been going. Rebecca Reeder did this, and it's just fabulous. I've probably watched it 10 times. And the music she had with it was great. The first song is I'm Gonna Live Forever. And I thought that is so perfect. But I have another friend that I'm gonna let say a few words, and that's Scott Glazier with the Airmanship Foundation. And it was Dick Rutan that really helped them. So Scott, do you want to come up and just say a few words? They did the flyover today, and of course Zach Reeder.
So I will make it, that's a very hard act, Paul, but thank you very much. So I'll make it faster and funnier. But truly in the legacy that Dick wanted to leave for all of us, from carrying on his passion into the future, he truly did that with us, with our organization. So our organization is the Airmanship Foundation. If you hear us on the radio on Mojo Flight, we train formation and other STEM topics to new pilots and so forth, and to youngsters. That whole organization started here in about 2011. I showed up here at Mojave as an engineer at the time, and I fly a Yak, a Russian airplane, which is very much not Mojave. Right? And I showed up here, and it was a few weeks before the 30th anniversary picnic for Scaled Composites. And I met some of the young engineers at Scaled. I said, hey, we should do a formation flyover for this picnic. Just real simple, 4-ship. And by the way, I had some training in this other civilian organization. Yeah, we'll do that. So we start talking about it. We hadn't practiced yet or anything, and I'm going to barbecue. Now, of course, I know who Dick Rutan is. Similar stories as everybody here, Voyager and so forth. But have you ever been somewhere and not recognize somebody because it's out of context? You know what I mean? Like, you expect to see, a rock star or somebody on a stage, not a barbecue standing next to you. So I'm standing there, and this person walks up to me and grabs me by the arm and goes, you're the guy putting on this formation thing, aren't you? I said, yeah, I am. He goes, well, that's a bad idea. Just before I'm about to say something really stupid, I have a moment of reserve, and I said, well, sir, who are you? And he goes, I'm Dick Rutan. I'm like, okay, I should probably listen to what you have to say. So I listened. I said, so, sir, why don't you tell me why you? Well, these Scale kids, they've been wanting me to teach them formation forever, and I haven't had time to do it, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're going to kill themselves, I'm like, you know what? You're absolutely right. We should do this right. So we got to talking, and I told him, I said, hey, I'm part of this civilian formation training organization called FAST, and there's a whole syllabus, and it's a Red Star Pilots Association, we fly the Yaks and stuff, but it applies, and we've got a whole manual and whole 9 yards. I said, this sounds good. Send me your stuff, I'll take a look at it. So I send him the manual, he calls me up and says, this is good stuff, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put together a ground school, we're going to invite everybody, if it all goes well, I'm going to hand them off to you, get your instructors, and go off and you barely teach formation. I said, great, let's do that. So it's supposed to be an hour-long ground school. It turned out to be about 45 minutes of ground school. Of course, everybody was there. Dick Rutan teaching formation, right? And it's at the terminal building over here. About 45 minutes of formation, ground school, and about 2 hours of Dick Rutan show, which was awesome, right? All the war stories and all that kind of stuff. But it was from a different perspective, too, right? One of the things he taught formation was, if you screw up your rejoin and you go ahead of your lead, you go ahead of the 3-9 line, pretty much all you can do to save your name is freaking eject. Wow, that's pretty severe. And so about an hour later, he's telling that same story somebody was telling about that he was rejoining on his Misty Wingman that was having a problem. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out well for them. But he was telling that story. He says, I was doing this rejoin, and I came in to help my buddy, and I blew the rejoin, and I went ahead of his 3.9 line. Come to think of it, I probably should have just freaking ejected. Over Vietnam, wow, that's insightful, thank you. But it was great, and he imparted that to all of us, and then he turned us loose, and he was with us every step of the way past that, helped with some of the training and things like that. Long story short, that organization exists today as the formal 501c3, the Airmanship Foundation. We've given wing cars and formation training to a number of folks. One of the proudest things we've done, again, thanks to Dick, is 4 of our members are now test pilots out of that, and I'm one of them, and so is Zach and Brian, who are flying today. And we were all, when this thing started, just line engineers with private pilot's licenses. And that's more of the legacy of Dick Rutan. He gave us that gift, and we carry that on, and we're very proud to say that he was one of the founders of our organization. So, thank you all very much. I hope that co-host for
I love that, and I can hear Dick just getting after him. He was passionate, and he was right, and he wanted to share his knowledge and his skills, and he did. And he shared not only with people like Scott, but he'd be in the Voyager, and little bitty kids would come in, and they'd see the map on the wall, and they'd wonder, what is that? And I say, well, that's Voyager flew around the world on one, unrefueled and non-stop, and it took them 9 days, and their eyes get really big, and they want to see the route. And sure enough, Dick would be sitting there. So he'd come over and start talking to him. And the next thing you know, these kids are asking him questions, and he's just really engages with them. And with Dick Rutan, when he's talking to little kids, and Oshkosh, he was fabulous. He'd just get down on his knees so he's at their level. And it was so neat to watch. And the inspiration, you know, some of those kids grew up to be pilots. Some of them may have joined the Air Force. But because of his inspiration, and it didn't matter, it was kids of all ages. And there's still a kid in me. I know there's still a kid in you. And that's the kid that he could inspire. So thank you, Dick. We miss you and we love you. And I'm going to give a closing prayer because I don't think Pastor Aaron made it, but that's okay. I know how to pray. If you'll just join me. Father God, we come to you and we thank you for this day. We thank you for Dick Rutan. We thank you for his inspiration. And we thank you for his life. Please go with each of us today and bless our lives and help us to be an inspiration and bring glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen.